F1. Red flag. Red flag's to slow down. What?
The checkered flag is waiting.
I can see our Checkered Flag podcast being quite spicy.
5 Live's Checkered Flag podcast.
Max Verstappen with another win from quite far back on the grid to extend his championship lead over Sergio Perez to 14 points with a victory in the Miami Grand Prix. Here to dissect it with me, Jack Nichols, we've got Jolyon Palmer, the former Renault F1 driver and our race commentator for this weekend and future weekends as well, is Harry Benjamin. Now, that wasn't like it's a one-time only thing, Harry. Like, it's fine.
Sorry, yeah, a couple.
Yeah.
A couple.
Yeah.
Not too many.
No, okay, but enough to, just enough to...
Keep my name dabbling around.
Yeah, exactly. What did you make of that race then, Jolyon Palmer? Verstappen won it fairly easily in the end?
Yeah, he did.
Harry's
really
probably got
easily.
more commitment to BBC F1 than you do, though, to be fair.
Honestly, I was just waiting for you to get into all the contractual situations going on here with the commentary lineup.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a bizarre opening to the podcast, but yeah.
Well, we've just had one of our co-coms pull out later in the year. Me and the producer, Joe, were just discussing who's going to be in for the... the behind-the-scenes gossip is good.
It's really,
this is what people tune in for podcasts for.
It's really not good. Verstappen... He was too good today. He started 9th and was just too fast. Was clinical with his overtakes and was just too fast for Perez. He's been pretty quick all weekend. He's been quicker than Perez. And the one mistake he made was in Q3 and it gifted pole position to Sergio Perez. And that was as good as it got for him. He just never looked comfortable, never looked like he could match Max today.
Today, Harry, or the whole weekend? What was the feeling going into the start of the Grand Prix?
Well, on Friday, there was optimism, really, off the back of Baku for Perez to bring it. Another street track. Could that play to Perez's advantage? But the track was resurfaced at the start, before this weekend even began, and that proved to be a bit of a struggle grip-wise, and Perez never really found the right grip levels that he wanted, and Verstappen... from FP1 onwards, kind of looked like the guy that was going to get pole position. Qualifying, different story. And we spoke about this as well. Yes, Perez lucked into it. He wasn't as fast, and it should have been a Verstappen on pole. But Perez was there to set the lap time when he needed to. So I think he was always going to be resigned to being behind Verstappen. I'm a little bit surprised at how quickly Verstappen got up to the back of Sergio Perez. I think Fernando Alonso said lap 25 it was going to be, and it was lap 15. So I would have said more on the 25 mark.
I think that's the concern with this one is, look, I predicted the order. I predicted Verstappen would win from Perez. Done. Thank you.
I don't think you had Alonso third, though.
I listened to it back. But... I've lost my point now.
You said you predicted the order and you knew it all along.
But I didn't think Verstappen would do it as easily as he did. He was in second place in 15 laps. He was within 5 seconds of Perez at that point. At that point, you kind of know it's done unless Perez has been really holding back, which he hadn't, because on about lap 17, he's on the radio saying my tyres are going. Really, really bad times for Checo. And in the end, I kind of admired his attempt of a defence because... he tried it on the inside of 17. He tried it on the inside of 1, but you just knew that in the end, the better grip was gonna prevail with Verstappen, and it did kind of straight away.
Well, let's hear from the race winner and championship leader Max Verstappen.
Max Verstappen, be honest with me. Did you expect to be able to win today?
No, I mean, I personally thought P2 that was definitely in there, but I mean, you need a bit of not luck, but. I didn't expect to have that pace advantage today, we definitely had a good car. The car was good on the tires. I felt really comfortable in the car, and I think that really made my race because I had to look after that first tire set, the hard tires, quite long in the beginning, but it worked out really well.
A lot's been made of this title battle between the two Red Bull drivers. Do you feel like you put a bit of a marker down today?
It's very early on, but if I just keep doing what I'm doing, then we will be fine.
So that was Verstappen talking to Christian Hugel after the Grand Prix. Strategy-wise, talk to me about this. Was Verstappen always on? Was he on the preferable strategy compared to Perez? He was always going to come out at the end of the race with fresher, softer tyres. So was Perez a bit stitched up by the strategy choice at the start, or was that the only option if you were starting at the front of the field?
Well, honestly, Red Bull can do what they like, and they're going to finish at the front of the field.
Yeah.
So it's about what they're doing compared to each other. And I think the way that they were starting, I think Verstappen would have been happy knowing that Perez was on the mediums and he was on the hards, because it gave him that chance to come through when he made his pit stop, as we saw. But, Perez was on the mediums at the start. He wasn't quick enough on the mediums. He pitted for the hards. He wasn't quicker on the new hards compared to Verstappen's older hards. So it really doesn't matter. The strategy doesn't matter in this one. It was just pace on any given moment in the race. I think there was about 4 laps where Perez pitted and he was just inching down on Verstappen. And then we heard GP, Max's engineer, saying, you can push now. Made a mistake in the final sector. Then he gunned it, built up the gap. It looked like he was even going to just overcut Perez, pitted, and had to make the pass, but it was easy. It was a pace race, not a strategy race.
But it was that gap, though, that was kind of so ominous, really. Pit stop loss was, 17 seconds, 20 seconds, really, once you actually get out back onto the track. And once Perez was behind Verstappen after he pitted, Verstappen maintained that gap between 15 and 17 seconds, really. And if Verstappen's, it was actually, we say it's a bit of a tardy pit stop. It was, the quickest ones we saw were 2.2. It was about a second slower than that. So if he'd had a 2.2, Verstappen would have come out of the pits side by side with Perez and may well have got him right there, slam dunk pass, which I think highlights how ominous that drive was.
And also, you're kind of quite keen here to look at the strategy, and were Red Bull helping out Verstappen and hindering Perez with your line of questioning, I feel?
No, it's not a leading question. It's a genuine curiosity, because surely Red Bull go into a Grand Prix knowing the best way to run the race, the preferable strategy. I know that changes I know it changes depending on where you're starting on the grid, of course. But that was just my question. Presumably you want to be on the medium tyres for your final stint when the car's a bit lighter, and then it hurts the tyres less and blah, 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 or no?
But we very rarely see that, do we? Like the reverse strategy. We very rarely see anyone do that unless you're out of position.
Because people don't want to lose places on the opening lap if you're at the front.
Precisely. That's why.
But you said Red Bull can do any strategy they want and still win the race. So you could have started Perez on the hards. He would have been fine and won the race, no?
Well, he would have been second behind his teammate.
Yeah. Okay, fair point.
But there's a reason that the top 7 all started on the Perez strategy, and those that were out of position, I'm thinking Verstappen, Hamilton and Stroll, all started on the hards. It's for the same logic, really. You go long, you go racy at the end on the mediums, on the reverse strategy. I think Red Bull did quite a normal thing. It's just unusual to see them, especially when you kind of knew it was going to boil down to Red Bull v Red Bull at the end, and they're on split strategy. So it's a little bit unusual from that point of view. But I think when you look at the individual races from the start of Perez and Verstappen, I think it kind of makes sense. And again, the strategy really didn't make the difference. It was the pace that made the difference.
Verstappen made the difference. That was just being him as a person. That's what did it. Because you look at the other guys who started on hards. Lewis Hamilton, he made up positions, but he couldn't find some miraculous pace in his Mercedes. Russell still finished ahead of him, and he had the Perez strategy as well. So Verstappen just slightly worrying, really. I think Sergio's got a lot of work to do coming into Imola.
Well, let's hear from him after Miami.
You said to us yesterday that you were hoping that Max wouldn't be a factor in your race. Obviously he was. Why do you think that was?
Well, I think he was very fast today, and his strategy seemed to work really well with his tires, and yeah, he deserved the victory today.
Why do you think he did have the pace advantage today?
I think one was the tire. The tire did work for him, so well done on him. And secondly, I think he just had a better rhythm than us, so we need to understand what went wrong.
Sergio Perez finishing in second place. We will be back in a few moments' time with some more analysis of the Miami Grand Prix. Myself, Jack Nichols, Harry Benjamin and Jolyon Palmer with you on the Chequered Flag podcast, discussing the Miami Grand Prix, the 5th round of the championship. And we've been discussing Verstappen versus Perez. Verstappen was so good. It's impossible to answer this question, but Verstappen, great day. Perez, off weekend. Bit of both, or impossible to judge?
I think Verstappen was really good. The way that he came through the field was exceptional. He was actually fairly clinical with all his moves in the whole day, but
It was a great 3 wide. I loved that 3 wide, overtaking 2 cars into one.
Exactly, the 3 wide. I think it was Leclerc and Magnussen early on, and it was just punchy from Verstappen. It was punchy, clinical, and really tidy. The move on Russell that he did as well was kind of from pretty far back into 17.
Yeah.
And I was looking forward to that one after the beef they had in Baku. I was thinking, come on, this could get a bit argy again, because George has been racing Max really, really aggressively for the last couple. Max just didn't give him a chance to. Was really late on the brakes from about 3 car lengths back. Absolutely mugged him. So I think he did have a really good day. His pace was phenomenal. Kept those hard tyres going kind of forever with good pace. And Perez, by the same token, didn't have a great day. You're referenced against your teammate when you've been destroyed as well as he was in today's race. Great from Verstappen and not so great from Perez. But he was still 20 seconds clear of Alonso, so the pace of the Red Bull's pretty chilled for them.
Yeah, Alonso then in 3rd position. A return to form from Alonso after his terrible outing in Azerbaijan, where he finished 4th instead of 3rd, like he has been at every other Grand Prix this year. That was this was a normal Alonso race. Well, he sort of had some fights in there, but in the end, the 3rd was fairly comfortable.
Yeah, it started off the weekend as a bit anonymous, really, for both Aston Martins. They seemed fairly off the pace. They, in the bottom ends of the top 10. Stroll, obviously, then having that disaster in qualifying and with it all to do in the race, and didn't really make any huge gains. He started down in 18th. Alonso, sublime, perfect. I had him down for the win. If we'd had a few skirmishes, which we didn't seem to get really in those opening laps. There was a few sort of maybe front wings that had a bit of a knock. Logan Sargent got into a bit of trouble early doors, but Alonso got the maximum out of that Aston Martin. 3rd place, back on the podium. The smile on his face said it all on the podium. Aston Martin super happy with that. And it's pretty consistent for him at the moment.
Let's hear from the Spaniard.
Fernando Alonso, another podium, and you've obviously had to endure years of uncompetitiveness in other teams, and even with Alpine last year, you weren't, fighting for podiums regularly. How much are you enjoying being back fighting at the top end regularly?
I do enjoy a lot. Obviously now it's fantastic time for the team and for myself. 4 podiums in 5 races. Probably today has been the fastest race for us in terms of the gap to the leader. I think it has been only 12 or 13 seconds to Checo, so this is quite a good news for us, and we are getting closer and closer, so this is a good news.
Explain something to me. How on earth, when you're driving a Formula 1 car around a street circuit where the walls are so close to the track, on a slippery tarmac as well, do you possibly have time to be looking at the TV screens? They're designed for the fans, not for the drivers.
Yeah, it depends on the circuit, but here today we have a little bit of a lonely race. I didn't have any pressure from behind, nothing to do in front of me with the Red Bulls, so yeah, out of 10-11 we had this big TV screen that we watch every lap when we go through there, and I saw Lance making some moves, so I was happy to see that.
So you don't need to watch the highlights when you get home now. Lovely.
Yeah, I still need to rewatch the full race.
Thank you, Fernando.
Thank you, guys.
3rd place then for Alonso. I mean, I think we're in for a season of just Alonso doing what Alonso does and
finishing 3rd.
And finishes 3rd. Yeah.
Just
with the occasional
every
4th.
race. It might get a 4th if Leclerc or a Hamilton can nail it, but he's driving really well, isn't he? I mean, some laps his pace was comparable with Perez. Russell was quite decent just behind as well, but not much to say. He had a pretty quiet outing in the end. Kept Sainz behind, passed him in a bit of a slightly weird move when Sainz almost looked like he let him go through.
Yeah.
It was fine from Alonso. Fine, perfectly good. And I was actually, conversely, very surprised that given Alonso's performance, that Stroll didn't get some points out of this one.
Yeah,
even from 18th.
Yeah, only made it up to 12th place, and he basically just got ahead of the non-runners, really. You know what I mean? Like, did he even get he got both the Alfa Romeos. Didn't get Tsunoda. I thought jumping around a little bit. I thought Tsunoda actually had quite a solid race.
I thought he might pick up that final point if he could keep off the pace, but he just fell off the cliff in those last few laps.
Because he qualified right at the back, didn't he?
Yeah. De Vries, well, not right at the back. De Vries out-qualified him for
exactly,
the first
but he
time.
was like 18th or 19th or something.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Tsunoda was good.
Let's
scattergun it again.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
McLarens were a bit weird.
Oh, yeah, they were. And Albon,
Disaster.
too. Right, we will go back to regular order. Right, Mercedes and Ferrari. Let's start with Mercedes. Russell had a... Okay. I really quite enjoyed that Grand Prix. And it comes to and so I think that's really good for Miami, that the race was good because we had a lot of scrapping with your Russells, with your Sainzes, with your Hamiltons, with your Leclercs, and then Gasly getting involved at the end. That sort of behind the top three was good stuff.
So I agree. The wheel-to-wheel stuff was really nice. The different strategies that converged quite nicely at the end as well, obviously with the Red Bulls, but also Hamilton charging through. Russell had a pretty good drive, came back past Sainz. There was some nice stuff out there. But then at the same time, the back of my mind's going, we just really lowered our standards for what makes a good Grand Prix when you know that Verstappen has got this one in the bag after about 15 laps. If you take away the Red Bulls, they're all really strong Grand Prix at the moment. And I think people would look at this really favourably based on the wheel-to-wheel action that we had. All 20 cars finished. Pretty much all of them were getting stuck in at various points. It was quite fun. I mean, there was plenty going on to keep your eye on up and down the order in commentary. Just at the top was the bit that everyone's kind of here to watch who wins, and we kind of knew who was going to win it.
Yeah, but even then, there was enough for me at the front. You kind of knew deep down Verstappen was coming through, but it was only 10 laps to go. He took the lead, and I know it looked ominous. He was going to come out with fresher tyres. It was going to be done, but we still had an overtake for the lead with 10 laps to go.
Yeah, it could have been worse. It could have been worse between the two Red Bulls. There was a moment I thought he was just going to pit and come out ahead of Perez, which would have been a little bit depressing for the sake of the Grand Prix that we don't even get the fight between the Red Bulls. As it was, the fight lasted a few corners. It was all right. I was just turning up today before the Grand Prix. I just thought, we're set for a thriller. Verstappen's going to charge through. Perez, we're going to get back to Hamilton-Rosberg sort of stuff. This could be the moment where Perez stakes his claim by going elbows out. It's a duel in the desert style of thing. And if Verstappen will be quicker, he will come towards Perez. But can Perez hang on? And actually, as the Grand Prix went on, it was just obvious that he was second rate in this one compared to Max. So that's the shame of it. But overall, I agree that there was good racing action. And you know what? I'm really pleased they didn't extend the DRS because it seemed
just
about right
to ask you. What's your summation then of that? Yeah, happy it wasn't.
Yeah, everyone needs to relax on that, don't they? They've got to relax. We had so much overtaking in this one.
Do you not remember? Was it the preview podcast this weekend when I went on that bit of it? Like, Baku's bad for overtaking just as a race. Like, every single year, Baku's bad, and then Baku's bad, and everyone's like, oh, everyone's crying because we didn't get drive-by DRS passes. This was good. It was all brakes stuff. You had a few drive-bys, but barely any. I actually was really impressed with the circuit, let's say, because people were a bit meh about it last year. It wasn't the best race in the world last year, but there was some overtaking. Verstappen overtook Leclerc. There was a bit of fighting with Schumacher, but the whole track was breaking up at the hairpin, wasn't it? So you couldn't really do that fight back from the hairpin into turn one that we saw today. And I thought it was a pretty solid. We had the Mercedes and the Ferraris fighting.
Yeah, it was good. And the track itself, there's 3 DRS zones, and you can overtake into any one of them.
Yeah,
that's what's quite good. You can pass into one, but if you don't, you stay tight, and you can pass coming into 11. Then there's 17, which leads back into 1, and it's all kind of circular, really. If you don't make the move in 1. You get the chance again soon if you can stay close, which everyone seemed to be able to do, despite the dirty air being so much worse than last year, apparently. And we even had a lot of pass and repass.
Do you not believe that apparently was a little bit like...
Look, I believe that it's worse, but it's obviously not a huge amount worse, given we were seeing a lot of cars following each other pretty closely through the Grand Prix. It'll be worse. The downforce is more. Everything that we've spoken about already this weekend will mean that the dirty air is worse, but it's not night and day different, in my opinion, looking at the races that we've had. We're still seeing really good overtakes, and crucially, more good overtakes on the brakes and side-by-side into the corner rather than DRS drive-bys.
It felt like we got my 110 overtakes, finally, my stat from last year's Grand Prix, which may be technically true, but 45 on-track passes apparently was the real answer to that one. But I had low expectations for Miami. I didn't enjoy last year's race. It spiced up at the end because we had the safety car and it was Gasly and Norris coming together. But apart from that, I didn't really have a lot. This one was great. Well, okay, great's a bit of a stretch, but it was enjoyable, I felt. But it didn't have any dramas or collisions, which I think amplifies that as well. It didn't need that to really make it still an enjoyable race.
So here's the question. would you, if you could rerun next year at Miami, you can have this race or last year's race, a version thereof.
Yeah.
Which one did you prefer, last year's Miami or this year's Miami?
This year's
Miami.
Well, because I think there
What's
was
the trick
more
question?
jeopardy in the fight for the lead, I think, last year. Actually, when you remember it, and you got Verstappen passing Leclerc,
Yeah, but
then
on
in the
about-
closing
yeah, but on
stages,
about lap
Leclerc's
15,
hounding him
wasn't it?
down. It was early on,
Yeah.
and then but then the
Because
safety
Verstappen was
car and
behind the-
Leclerc's back in DRS, and they're title rivals, and there was something on
Does
it.
it just underline how low your expectations have gone, though? Because that wasn't it wasn't one of the moves of the season.
I
was
actually
it?
don't remember
Exactly.
the end of the Grand Prix last year. You're saying all this, and I'm like, I was there, standing next to you, and I don't really
You
remember.
don't listen to me at the best of times.
But next year, I'd have a similar race under the lights. I think it would look quite nice.
Oh,
quite
no,
nice as a night race.
no.
I
Get
think
out
it
of
would.
town. We're not having every race becoming a night race.
They all
at
look
the
so much
moment. No.
cooler in the light, though. In the dark, even, I should say. Under the lights.
No, we're not having that.
No, it's
I
fine.
thought it was
All right,
okay.
Palmer's
I thought
spoken,
it,
fine.
I thought it was okay, and I'd have it again. But what I'm just saying is, last year there was a bit more. I just felt there was a bit more jeopardy for first,
Yeah.
and not that much for the rest of the field. Whereas this race, there was loads of great racing action through the field, whilst we kind of knew from early on who would probably win it.
Well, here's my question. Was today's race only quite good because we ended up with a pretty jumbled top 10?
Yes.
Right, with Hamilton down in 13th. Okay, that was a pure pace thing. But Leclerc crashing out, I mean, the TBD whether he'd done any better if he hadn't crashed out because it was bad. But Verstappen starting now. If Verstappen's on pole and Leclerc's third and Hamilton's starts sixth, maybe we're not. But like that little sprinkle of jumble in Q3 helped, I think, a little.
It helped, you had a Magnussen up there in fourth.
Yeah.
And that's what made the race for me, actually. It was Kevin Magnussen and Charles Leclerc doing battle.
Yeah.
Without that, I think we'd be having a bit of a different conversation because that was brilliant to watch. Super exciting. You'd think it would be fairly straightforward that Leclerc would get through, and he did, but then Magnussen back in front several times over. And without that, I think we would have been really struggling in the mid part of that race.
I don't know. I think that was it was a great display of actually some good wheel-to-wheel action that we had. The people, a lot of the viewers or listeners would not have found this race particularly enthralling just because of the fight for the win, and it was Verstappen in the end that was walking it. But we did, like the wheel-to-wheel between Leclerc and Magnussen, took 37 laps for Leclerc to finally shake off Magnussen, and it was 3 times K-Mag came back at him. It was quite fun. And a lot of the battles were really close wheel-to-wheel. It was quite fun, but just out front, a little bit less so.
So let's get into Charles Leclerc. Harry, you sort of brought it up yesterday on the qualifying podcast about, when do we sort of start asking questions about Leclerc because, another error, another accident. What did we make of his race today? And yes, that's the first question.
I think it's fair to say it was below par, below expectation for not just everybody outside of the Ferrari garage, but also within it. Look at Sainz. He actually looked quite electric in the early stages of this race, hounding Alonso at one point. Without the penalty, would have had a good battle on maybe, but then the pace just fell away. But Leclerc, I don't know whether it was compounded by the lack of being able to get through on Magnussen. He was just a bit stuck, but he just seemed to maybe he was being a little bit more cautious as he lost his mojo slightly a little bit. He had brilliant Baku, but overall this year, it's not gone his way. It's not all been his problem, but I think this is not the first time, and it probably won't be the last time we had this discussion on Leclerc, who bins it in qualifying or crashes out of the lead of a race once Ferrari finally get their act together, or Red Bull suddenly have a double DNF and Leclerc's out in front, but then suddenly he's in the wall. You won't be too surprised to hear that, and that's the issue, I think. Leclerc, as Palmer put it several times, is win or bin, and you can't be like that, I don't think. You can be the best Formula One driver ever, but if you keep binning it, you're not going to get your championship wins.
Well, today he wasn't win or bin, and then we're saying, was he a bit underwhelming? So
there's no winning.
So what you're saying is he listened to the pod last
can't
night
win.
and was like, right, Palmer thinks I'm win or bin. I'll prove him wrong.
I've got that level of clout amongst the drivers. They
Sure.
really want to dial into the Chequered Flag podcast after qualifying and just hear my view on the key events. But Leclerc will know after crashing yesterday. It's not that Palmer said it on the podcast. It's that the world is talking about another crash for him.
Yeah.
He'll know that he's got to go straight after qualifying and face the media. 30 microphones in his face for he actually waited a long time after yesterday and then gathered his thoughts and then went to go and speak to media from across the world to explain his latest crash. He'll know that the pressure was a little bit on him today, and I think he was a little bit off his game, to be honest. The way that he had 3 fights with Magnussen, he just wasn't clinical in the fights there. He especially the last one.
This was going to be my question. I feel, and I think I've been poo-pooed by this before on the pod, but before this, I'm not convinced in Leclerc in wheel-to-wheel scenarios. And the thing that it gets thrown back at me is, Bahrain, him versus Verstappen, he comes out on top. But I just feel like he never really kind of defends. I feel like he never really fights. I feel like he does sort of the drive-by DRS as if he can, if he's in the rut, but I don't know if Leclerc gets his elbows out enough and is real racy for me personally.
Well, he did the half defence against Hamilton at the end today, when Hamilton came through, defended into turn 11 and gave Lewis enough room to just take the inside, and that was 6th place in the closing stages. I feel like that's what
he sort of goes to the middle a lot, but never actually defend. Just he kind of goes through the motions almost. Is how I feel sometimes.
He's a thinking racer rather than an aggressive racer. He's very good on his DRS zones and the sort of strategy of where to be close, where to line up a pass and this sort of stuff. But yeah, he's not the most aggressive wheel-to-wheel racer. I'd maybe agree.
It took him a while to work that out today with Magnussen, I felt. Like he finally worked out, don't attack him into the hairpin, and then do the DRS into
that
one.
Came way too late, I thought. That was he should have realised that way sooner.
Well, one of his moves earlier on was into turn 1, wasn't it? And Magnussen came back through. I think it wasn't always the same thing that he was doing. I think one was in 11, one was 17, and then one was 1. So it's difficult to work it all out when it's changing the whole time. In the end, when Magnussen did come back into 1, he just sorted it out the next lap and was through. I think he's a smart guy. Charles. Yeah. I think he's a smart racer, but maybe not, super aggressive. Can't think of. I'm sure someone at home is thinking of obvious examples of where he's been really feisty for significant position. But I agree with you. I can't think of one off the top of my head
because I also don't really remember him colliding with people ever, like going wheel to wheel and having a bump or losing it because he's never in those scenarios.
But that's not always a bad thing, is it? Sometimes, again, when we bring up Magnussen, he is that guy who will go side by side.
Came out today was just a joy.
But that often can go the wrong way for him as well. He puts that Haas in an amazing position, has a bump and a barge, and then it's in for a front wing change, and that's it for Haas, no points.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
How
that's
fun
the fun
was it today?
No, I love it, but
exactly.
that's where Leclerc...
No, you're like, play the percentages, Kevin. That's what you're desperate for.
But what I love about it is he had no right to be fighting with a Ferrari as hard as he was.
Yeah.
When Magnussen's on the grid at the start of the race, he's in 4th. Günther Steiner spoke to us and said, if we can get points, that's great today. He's so 4th. Seems a bit negative. But of course, the pace of the Haas, the way that they normally score points, you just take points in any race you can. So you don't be greedy. Then Magnussen is passed by Leclerc on lap 1. He's then coming back at him lap 2 and 3, finally makes it through. Is wheel to wheel with him another couple of times. And this is a Ferrari of the guy that was double pole last time out and got the podium in Magnussen in the Haas. It was a really plucky drive. And I just love that he just gave it a shot. A lot of people, you're in a slower car and you don't fight, especially with the Red Bulls coming through today. There were a few drivers that actually, I think Gasly, you just wave the white flag, let Verstappen come through because they're in a different race. And that should theoretically have been the case with the Ferrari and a Haas. But Magnussen just doesn't know any different. He just sees a car and he wants to race him.
Were you a fighter? Or were you like a...
Yes.
No, but no, seriously. No, I'm not taking... if someone was... if Hamilton was coming through from the back, are you like, yeah, through you go? Or were there any cars where you were in a fight where you had no right to be in the fight and you just thought, I'm just going to make this guy's life difficult for a bit?
I remember my first race in Melbourne and I was a fighter because... It was all I knew from GP2. It was just, right, let's just see what happens. I remember fighting with Bottas. He was in a Williams that were really quick at the time. And for some reason, he was starting further back. He came up to me and I was just defending like it was my life's work. And eventually he came through. And then
Meanwhile, you'd lost 10 seconds defending from him.
Exactly. This is the thing. You learn from it and you're like, what was I doing there? I nearly got a point at the end, but I didn't because I was messing around with Bottas in the first 10 laps.
So what, do you think if you hadn't fought with Bottas, you'd have finished in front of the Toro Rossos?
Maybe that could have been it. I could have been 9th on debut.
Yeah.
Wow,
that would have given me such a confidence boost. I would have gone through the roof there, and
the career trajectory would
I'd
have
still
been...
be at Alpine now, part of the furniture.
Yeah.
But no, you work out that a lot of the time it's
you'd have
not
left
worth
if they'd
fighting.
have changed from Renault. We found that out yesterday.
Oh,
You bleed Renault. So as soon as they go from the yellow to the blue, you're
With
like,
the brand change, and I'm out of there. Guys. I know that there's a big overall picture here, but no. If you change from Renault, I'm gone.
So that's the thing. You, as a F1 driver, you learn to be boring and don't waste your energy and waste time fighting.
Welcome to Formula One. Yeah, you do, because it is pragmatic. When the cars there's a big discrepancy in the car pace. You know, if you're Gasly, why are you going to fight and keep Verstappen behind?
So was Magnussen an idiot today for fighting with Leclerc? Could he have finished 8th if he just pootles around behind Leclerc?
He might have been able to finish a little bit higher up, but I mean, I don't actually know if he would. 5 seconds difference to Ocon is probably not enough. But it's fun. And I
agree.
I just think you can never criticise someone that does get stuck in. Alonso loves it as well. He's a guy that he very rarely will cede position to anyone, especially in the midfield. Actually, now he's fighting for podiums. He's also waving the Red Bull's bike because there's something at stake for him. But in previous years, in a McLaren, Honda, or whatever it was, he's not had a car to really fight, but he'll try his best at every occasion. Because it's what you're there for, really, the wheel-to-wheel action. That's the funnest part of racing Formula One.
I think Magnussen does it as well because, I mean, before last year, in his final couple of years at Haas, they were nowhere, racing nobody, just him and Grosjean, really, if they were together on track. So he's probably he's in a different mindset, right? He's just relishing being on the track, and any chance he gets to have a scrap, he knows, especially in 2023 in Formula One, how crucial that 10th place finish is. That 1 point is really being divvied up between all the midfield teams at the moment.
And also with all of this, you never say never. Magnussen, I think it took 37 laps for Leclerc to come through. There's a point where you're like, maybe I can just beat him today. Haas were pretty quick this weekend. Ferrari were having a really bad one. Leclerc was having an even worse one. There's a point where you're like, maybe you can. When I passed Valtteri Bottas in Singapore in the wet.
Oh, who could forget it? Down into turn one.
He was in a Mercedes, I was in a Renault. I was like, you know what? He's braked early. Let's go for it. I kept him behind the whole stint. And I thought, as I passed him, I thought, this is probably a bit futile. He's in the fastest car and I'm not. And then you start to do laps and you're like, actually, maybe I could beat him. And I didn't. But I thought it anyway.
Yeah. You did better. Yeah. So how? Anyway, we don't need to get into it. We'll do a
debrief of that Singapore Grand Prix.
We'll do a Chequered Flag podcast special.
Palmer's best bits
of the 27. Yeah, Palmer's best bit. The 20. Yeah. Right.
We'll make it a whole series.
Exactly. What else to say? One other disappointing for Bottas actually, and Alfa Romeo slipping back a little bit, having done well to get into Q3. McLaren, tough times. We've kind of covered them off enough, I think, over the weekend. The only one for me is De Vries at the start, because he out-qualified Tsunoda yesterday. Oh, okay, because he's had a really tough start to his F1 career proper. What did you make of that turn one? It just felt a bit clumsy, a big lock-up into the back of Norris, and his race is done, really, from that point.
Yeah, it was pretty much that. He was right behind Norris into the first corner. Obviously had dirty air, hit the brakes and just didn't stop at all. Ran the back of Norris, who had to pit in the opening laps. I don't know if that was because of damage or they started on the soft tyre anyway, which was a bold call at McLaren. Not a good one for De Vries. It's a shame again. I feel like there's been false dawns for him. Little moments where you think, okay, this is the real Nick De Vries now. Yesterday was one. Beat Tsunoda for the first time. Yuki had a good race today, as you mentioned, way ago.
Yeah. In the first half of the show, I think that was.
It was our headline.
Wait till we get to driver of the day.
11th. Yeah.
The thing is, though, we've had, what was that? The 5th race, wasn't it, in Miami? Tsunoda's first year, it came out the blocks, looking really quick. There was a bit of hype around him, and then he really kind of fell off the cliff in the whole middle part of the season. So this could well very easily turn around for De Vries. He could have a great run of form throughout the next couple of European races into Canada. You don't know. De Vries with a huge amount of experience outside of Formula One and within it through other teams too, as a reserve driver and a tester. But the start, as you said, Jack, seemed a bit silly, and 20 plus seconds off the back of teammate Tsunoda. So the high of out qualifying him for the first time really kind of gone now. And Tsunoda, I think, had a good race. 11th, probably the best in the end for him. But when do we start saying, has Tsunoda stepped up, or is his benchmark De Vries just not there yet at the moment? I don't know. I think Tsunoda stepped up personally.
I'm very surprised how much De Vries is struggling in Formula One now. I wouldn't have rated him as, you know, one of the brightest prospects coming through, even though he's got a very good CV. But I thought he would be a very solid driver to come in and I thought he'd lead AlphaTauri. I thought he'd be ahead of Tsunoda. I think you could say Tsunoda stepped up. He looks way better. He looks way more consistent so far this year, and he's doing a good job. But I'm just surprised that De Vries is struggling quite as much as he is. He's got a long time to try and sort it out. I still believe that he must get there. I think he's got the talent somewhere, but he just needs to adapt a little bit to Formula One, because there's a few things that I'm surprised that he's been caught out. The start today just looked like he wasn't really prepared for everyone breaking in the dirty air. It was like he was in Melbourne 2 laps to go start again, when actually he got nerfed by Sargent. But it was that sort of thing where it was a bit of a mad dash and you hit the brakes and you're all a bit caught out. But it was lap 1 of the race on a full tank, and it was a strange one for De Vries. And after Baku as well, and the crash that he had there in the race, but also qualifying, he just needs to settle down a little bit, I think.
Settle down. Right, that's about it, I think. Well, 8th and 9th for the Alpines. Won't get too bogged down in them, but that takes them to 14 points. So they're level on points with McLaren, which is quite a strange one, considering they've both had terrible seasons, but also both okay seasons. It's very strange, that sort of midfield battle. And looking at the championship points in the Constructors, it's 224 points for Red Bull. So they've already got more than double the points of Aston Martin, who are on 102. Then it's Aston Martin second, 102, 96, 78 for them, Mercedes and Ferrari. Then from Ferrari in fourth, 78 points. McLaren in fifth have 14. 14. There's such a huge gap. And that's what we were saying. Those points for Magnussen, huge, because it's no one's picking up points other than the top 4.
No, not at all. It really is that. I don't know. It's that. Is it a side effect of this sort of increased competitiveness that we have in this? Well, everyone behind Red Bull, really, because sort of just Tsunoda, his results have been either 11th places or 10th places, and Australia maybe a little bit of the outlier that allowed the likes of Hulkenberg to get some good big points on the board at the 7th place, and that rockets him up suddenly the standings. Magnussen, I felt like he drove a race today that should have been rewarded with a few more points. 10th place almost doesn't seem like enough, really.
Reliability's been good as well. Yeah. Leclerc had his failure in Bahrain. Perez obviously started from the back in Melbourne with some underlying issue in his car. Apart from that, we had Russell had a fiery end in Melbourne. I don't think we've had more reliability for any of the conventional big guns. And now there's 4 teams that can do it. Stroll had an off weekend here, and so there were 7 drivers that could do it. But that means that they are scrapping around for sort of 2 points.
Right. Final thing, Miami. We mentioned earlier, race was quite good, enjoyed it. For me personally, I am now thinking, I like this on the calendar, actually. Nice track, cool city, the pomp and circumstance at the start. Jolien, you must have loved that. LL Cool J and Will.i.am introducing the drivers onto the grid.
I didn't hate it, you know.
Really?
I didn't even hate it.
Wow.
That's as much as I'll say for it.
It's got some vibe, hasn't it? It's got some
exactly.
vibe.
It's a bit of something, isn't it? It's a bit of something. Yeah. For a very glamorous race, I don't mind mixing up that sort of thing. Yeah. And I quite like the fact that the drivers go to the grid a bit earlier and there's a bit more going on, a bit more of a show.
You like Miami?
I do. I really do like it. And I think we've got 3, well, now 2 more races in America, but I think they're all going to give really different vibes as well, which I think is going to be brilliant too. So thumbs up for Miami.
Great. Cool. Vegas will be an interesting one. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Vegas. Like
To see me in Vegas.
Yeah. Like just to see where in like.
Can you vlog
with
it? Can you vlog the experience?
Yeah, that would be.
I think there's a big demand for that.
Like Palmer
on TikTok. Yes, please.
Grumping around Vegas.
Get out
very
of town.
busy, isn't it? All these celebrity, all this gambling. Well, that's not a good. Shouldn't gamble. You should just play the percentage game.
Spoiler alert, but that's exactly how it'll be. I'm a little bit worried about how manic it's going to be.
I know. I bet you are.
I'm
It's
here
gonna
for
be so
Kota.
busy.
I'm here for Kota, where it's a really good Grand Prix full of passionate, enthusiastic fans that know their stuff. I think Austin's the one, but maybe Vegas. I'm looking forward to going to a new place, and I can't wait for it, Jack.
The fans know their stuff in Kota because if Palmer's walking around with Will Buxton, they ask Will Buxton for the photo, and Palmer has to take it.
Look, they love a bit of F1 TV. They love it out there.
Right, driver of the day, Harry Benjamin.
I mean, Verstappen, brilliant, but for the sake of things, and because I'm not on the podcast very often, I'm going to go for Kevin Magnussen.
Okay, fair. Palmer?
No, it's Verstappen, isn't it? 9th to win easily. Who you go for?
I'm going Magnussen as well.
There we go. Finally.
Just for his
4th to 10th.
It was a Viking drive.
Exactly. He put it
He's
all
done
on the
pretty
line.
much the inverse of what Verstappen's done.
He put it all on the line.
That doesn't tell the story of his race, though.
No. I'm being flippant.
Who would be your
Shock.
number 2?
It would be Magnussen.
Okay, fine.
I wanted to disagree. What happened to Yuki Tsunoda for driver of the day?
Not quite. Stroll was closing in on him in the end as well, so he lost pace.
Tsunoda was great. I thought Tsunoda did a good job. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. We will be back ahead of the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. I nearly called it the San Marino Grand Prix, but it's not been that for a long, long time. 2 weeks' time until Imola. We'll be back with a preview podcast, the Saturday podcast, the Sunday podcast, all the commentary across the BBC Sport website and 5 Live and Sports Extra as well. We'll see you then. Thanks, Harry. Thanks, Jolien. Bye, everyone.